Special guest for Hour 1 this evening is Laurie Boggs. And Laurie Boggs has co-authored Hitting Fear Head-On and 18 Steps to Transforming Grief with her husband, Biff. She has studied extensively in the fields of emotional healing and spiritual counseling. She's an avid Vipassana Meditator as well as a certified intuitive, clairvoyant, and Reiki Master. Laurie has the unique ability to support and assist others in removing their attachments that cause suffering, blocks, and obstacles. She assists the client in facilitating their own healing, thus neutralizing their emotions in a warm, loving, and nurturing environment. Laurie's most difficult lessons came through the School of Hard Knocks, including overcoming a family history of alcoholism, abuse, and finally infertility. Ironically, it comes full circle when alcoholism ultimately takes the life of her only miracle child, and her website is www.laurieboggs.com. And please welcome Laurie to the show this evening. Hi, Laurie.
Hi, sweetheart. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing tonight?
Good. Thank you for having me on tonight.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And of course, it's really nice to have you on. And of course, I've heard wonderful things about you from our mutual friend, James Bartley, and he'll be on second hour tonight. But I did want to get in touch with you and talk about your book. It's very hard to read, but it's, you've been through a lot. And I'd like to kind of touch base on this in this book, Hitting Fear Head On. And let's talk about how you decided to write about this topic and give everybody just a brief rundown of what really happened.
Well, I really didn't decide to write the book. My son did, and he passed on the other side, and he's a pretty persistent little guy. And we were basically head on by a drunk driver, and 5 people were killed. And he was our only child after 7 years of infertility through miscarriages and 4 surgeries. And he had just turned 8, and I had premonitions before it was going to happen, and so that was a lot. So it was kind of just irony that we were hit on by a drunk driver because both my parents drove drunk with me as a child.
Mm-hmm.
So it came full circle. And so what happened because of my 2 near-death experiences, and when people would start asking me about my life, I would hear that you need to write a book, and I thought, no way, with this brain injury, there's no way. And it took it took 12 to 13 years to write. And a lot of the times, my husband Biff had to sit by me and, rewrite it for an editor to even be able to look at it. And then I put a lot of editing to it because I wanted it to be, readable and creditable and, make it nice so that people understand it. Because as you say, it's my life, so I came out at the other side. So for me, it's not painful anymore because I've neutralized that pain. But what I know with it and what I've heard from other people is as they read it, they receive a healing themselves because my book really goes into those dark places that we don't like to look at. But when we look at them is when it comes to the surface and it dissolves and then we get more light within us. And so it's a really healing agent for that. And so that was my inspiration. I didn't know what it was going to look like afterwards. But now that I've had the feedback, that's what I see. But I had to write it to Solaris to get it out of me. I mean, that pain was stuck inside me when I was head on. And, I was in the hospital for about 70 days, and 18 days I was in a coma, and they said I would never walk again and be so brain injured that I need a caregiver for the rest of my life. And my son was behind me saying, don't believe them, Mommy, you will walk again, you will walk again. So he was just kind of like a cheerleader, and he still is throughout this whole tragedy. And I think that's what has transformed it, is knowing that he never died. I mean, he's with us. They all are with us, teaching us and supporting us how to live through on this planet right now the way it is, so that we can have the truth instead of being manipulated.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And of course, it sounds like you're in communication with him still. Like, how does that communication take form?
It takes form in all different ways. Like I have a chihuahua, and she'll come up and just like want to hug me really bad, and I know that that's him. Or, and it's not like a needy hug. It's like, hi, Mom, I'm here, that kind of hug. And so, or I'll just feel him say, like in the morning, it's very precious, when you're asleep and you're just kind of waking up, and he'll just kind of sneak in and say, Mommy, you're the most beautiful girl in the world, and always remember that. Just those kind of things that are kind of corny, but it was kind of like how he was when he was alive too. So it's those kind of little messages that, that keep me going.
Right. Yeah, I can understand that. And of course, I mean, you've gotten through this, miraculously, actually, when you think about everything that you've been through, and I do applaud you for that. And what kinds of premonitions did you have before the accident?
Well, what happened is I just started hearing that he was going to die. And I was afraid to death when I was hearing that. And I went pretty crazy. I would say that on some level now it's hindsight and I can look back at it. I really do believe it was mind control now. And one of the premises in the books and why I wrote 18 Steps to Transforming Grief is we really have to be careful of when we think that we're speaking to angels or to other entities on the other side, that they're therefore our highest good and not trickster energy.
Mm-hmm.
And so, when I look back at it, I was, this is back in like 90, 93. And, when I look back at it, I was looking at talking to angels. And so I was reading some books on intuition and angels. And so when I would talk, I would hear, your son's gonna die. And I went crazy. And so I went to my Unity minister and he just said it was fear. My husband was saying it's fear. And, and to me, is like internalized inside it really internalized inside my body.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I basically became an alcoholic with that because that's how I coped. With both my parents drinking and being alcoholics, I didn't learn coping skills either. But when I was hearing that message, and I had premonitions before that would come true. So all it was just creating more and more evidence for myself
Mm-hmm.
when I was hearing this. And sometimes there was no emotion, but other times there was emotion. And now when I look back at it, I can see where I was manipulated.
Mm-hmm.
That it wasn't angels.
Right. It sounds like entities of some kind. Or do you think it was? Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, you go.
No, I was going to ask you, do you think it was maybe disembodied spirits, or do you think it was something pertaining to a covert intelligence program?
I don't know. I know that when I think back of it, I just think that it's something that, to me, if you want to call it, whatever non-beneficial energy we want to call it,
Mm-hmm.
to me, I was a feed for a lot of years. And I know that by the way I felt in my body.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so, I'm not a victim here because now I see. Now back then I was, because I didn't know better. I didn't have the tools or the understanding.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I know that my life force was fed off of for whatever reason, for whatever they were doing with my energy. But now that I know that, I get my energy back.
Mm-hmm.
Where people have a hard time is they don't call their energy back and they stay in the victim and are fed off, and then it just is a continued cycle.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, you're so right about that. And of course, being as psychic as you are, I can imagine that these whatever these entities were attaching on right then. Now, at what point did you get rid of them? At what point did you call your own energy back and get rid of all that?
Well, I think as I was writing the book, with Vipassana meditation, because I've done that for so long, I can feel the energy unravel inside my energy system now. So I can feel it drain off. And that took a few years. It took about the 7th year of Vipassana. It wasn't something that happened overnight. But when I was writing the book, I could feel my dad come in and stand behind me. And like there was a healing that was taking place for me and him. So as I was writing about us and clearing that energy out of our family history, as I was writing it and basically anchoring it, that's when I was starting to feel healing taking place, in different scenarios. I mean, it hasn't been one thing. It's been a number of things. It's been friends. It's been animals. It's been eagles. It's been, children, unexpected surprises that I know Preston has somehow, correlated and put together.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll always find out afterwards. I mean, I just met a girl in the grocery store that lost her son 13 years ago. And she said, and I call Preston Bubba, and she says, my son's name was Bubba. And I says, well, our Bubbas have put us together, you know, because she really needed some tools at that point in time. And so I sat and talked to her for a couple of hours just as, service to support her in a newly grieved mother, because I understood the pain, and it is very raw.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And I'm certainly glad you're doing the work you're doing, assisting. There are so many people who are dealing with some form of trauma, whether it's a loved one or whoever. So I'm really appreciative of what you're doing, and to get yourself to that level of being able to do this work is phenomenal. So once again, I'm really glad you're doing this. And
well, thank you.
Yeah. And also, when you were talking about your own premonitions, now you referenced your son, Preston, also having a premonition of his possible death. Is that correct?
Yes. So, about 3 days before the wreck, I had said to Preston, it was 3 days, whatever that day is, 3 or 4 days before the wreck, I could feel it. And I had said to Preston, Baba, please don't leave me. Please don't leave me. And he just kind of looked at me and didn't say, of course I won't leave you. He just kind of looked at me, didn't say anything. And then the day before our accident, or our wreck, he was at our neighbor's house and he drew this picture. I didn't know about the picture. And after I got out of the hospital, my neighbor had it framed for me, and she brought it over to our house. And she says when she heard of the car wreck on the radio, she went into the room that Preston was playing in, and she saw the picture, and she couldn't believe it. So she brought it over to share it with me. And in the picture, if you're on the website, it's on the website under Preston's messages, and it's a picture of him and God. And God has a crown on, and Preston's holding a ball, and he's in a cloud, and then there's an eagle outside, and then it's our house in Worland, Wyoming. And there's 3 houses, and then we had the Bighorn River behind us. And in the river, there's a shark going upstream. So about a year after the wreck, I asked Preston, what was he trying to tell me in this picture? And he said, Mom, fly high and soar with the eagles like me and God, and stay out of the illusion and fear, or the sharks will eat you alive.
Mm.
And so this picture is a definite knowing that he knew he was going to die, because the wreck was the next day.
Mm-hmm.
And, and he was so intuitive, and, he probably felt me knowing that he was going to die. You know what I mean, too?
Right.
What I'm saying there.
Yeah.
So, we both were Cancer sun signs. We're both very, very, very sensitive.
Mm-hmm.
With
right.
it, we just have a really special bond that Biff was even, Biff has some issues with it, because Biff wasn't as sensitive as we are. He wasn't as open as Preston and I were. So, and it was like Preston was like a longtime friend that came back to me.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Soul family.
So it was kind of an ironic threesome with the 3 of us.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But I think Preston and I were teaching Biff on how to be more emotional and more sensitive and stuff like that on some level.
Mm-hmm, exactly. It sounds like your auras were really connected. And I do suspect that's kind of a rip away to some degree, even though he was there on another dimensional space with you. Now, when you talk about your own near-death experiences, which you said you died twice, is that correct?
I did.
Okay. Was that right after the accident, or how did that happen?
It was right after, about an hour after the accident. It was pretty horrendous. When the car hit us head on, it was daylight. It was 4:30 in the afternoon, and I was driving, and Biff was the passenger, and I always had to drive to be in control, because I wasn't in control when my father drove. So Biff just let me drive instead of hear me complain about his driving. And then Preston was in the back, and he was singing a song, and laughing like he always is, playing, being the clown he is and making us laugh. And then all of a sudden this car just came at me, and I tried to move over, and wherever I moved, the car followed me.
Ugh.
And from what the officer said, when somebody is so intoxicated, they don't know that they're following you. They don't know that they're hitting you head on. They think that they're following you.
Mm.
So anywhere I turned my wheel, he was following me. So there was no way out. And I only had a few seconds to move anyways. And when we were hit head on, I heard an angel come down and say, remember this. And I'm like, okay. that's fascinating. And then they removed Biff and Preston right away out of the car. But I couldn't move. I was stuck in the car because my legs were crushed. And I say in the book that the vehicle was molesting me, because that's really what it felt like. I felt very violated. And it took about an hour for them to get the jaws of life. When they pulled me out of the vehicle, I was asking for pain medicine because the pain was so unbearable. My legs literally felt like they'd been through a meat grinder. Mm-hmm. And they said they couldn't give me any. I was too unstable. And the officer had told me that Biff and my son Preston were okay. They were alive, that I was really the only one that was injured. And I said, all right. So when I got into the ambulance, they rushed me to the hospital and removed my spleen. And while they were removing my spleen, I was awake. They didn't know I was awake. I was intubated, but I could feel the pain, and it was very, very painful because I was, awake while they were removing my spleen. And so I waved my fingers to ask for some help. And somebody had said in the surgery room, poor lady, she's been through a horrific wreck. Not only has she lost her son today, but she's been through this wreck. And I'm like, what? I lost my son. And I just went, no, I can't. No, I just couldn't even handle it. So I just said, no, God, I can't take anymore. I was like done. I was done. Mm-hmm. And then the next thing I know, I was in, the tunnel, and you hear all about that. And really, what's so fun now is to see the validation of all this, because the tunnel was really the color of the divine feminine and the masculine intertwined together, that really beautiful, fuchsia and, blue, and they just intertwined in the tunnel. And it was really a beautiful experience for me. And I didn't have any fear, and I get lost very easily. And so in this transition, there was no map needed. You are guided, like you are just guided where you need to go. And that, to me, was very, very freeing. Mm-hmm. And it was freeing to be out of my body because it was in so much pain. And it was freeing to know that in that realm that I was okay with Preston not there for a little bit. It's like, okay, what's going on here? There was like a freeing with it. I couldn't quite understand it. Mm-hmm. And then when I opened then at the end of this tunnel was like this big brown door, and I went into the door, and it was Preston and what I would say God, a divine source. He was more, I don't want to say he or she, who knows, to me it felt more masculine, but it was just this beautiful light that surrounded me and Preston and I were these lights, but there was this huge light. And I just said, what's going on? And God, I was very angry. I said, why are you taking my son away from me? It took 7 years. He took 7 years to get here, and I was very angry with God. And I said, I'll do whatever it takes to take care of Preston. Mm-hmm. And then Preston showed me a picture of him that if he would survive, he would be a vegetable. And he said, I don't want to be a vegetable, Mommy. And I said, Bubba, I'll change your diapers till you're 100. I don't care. And he said, no, Mommy, I don't want to be a vegetable. I don't want to go back in that body. And I knew Solaris at that point in time that it was going to take more love to let him go than it was to hold on to him. Right. And I couldn't ask him to do that. And so I said, okay. And I held him and I hugged him. And then part of it was I saw film strips of the premonitions and the history before the buildup at the wreck. And they were showing me this. And then God took Preston to his heart and kind of enfolded me with his light arms, if you want to call it that, mm-hmm. and just said, Preston's in the safest place there is. Mm-hmm. And I said, okay. And they said, you need to go back because you have work to do. And then they pushed me, and I gave Preston a kiss goodbye, and they pushed me out of the realm. And then when I came out of it, it felt like I was putting on a pair of shoes 2 sizes too small. Mm-hmm. It was very, very uncomfortable. And I was being life-flighted to Casper at that point in time. I could smell blood. And then I just passed out from the excruciating pain I was in.
Wow.
And that was one near-death experience. And then the other near-death experience was, I don't know what day it was in the coma. Um, I don't have that memory, or I didn't ask anybody, but it was just kind of cabobbled. But from that first hospital, that they thought that my legs, they thought I died. They didn't care about it. They cleaned me up, so they just put me into the helicopter to life flight me to Casper to see what they can do. When they got me to Casper Hospital in Wyoming, my legs were really bad and they got an infection. And so after the surgery, they had to give me an overabundance of antibiotics. And even to this day, I have repercussions from that antibiotics. I've been chemically injured from them.
Mm-hmm.
And, but what happened with those antibiotics is I became very systemic. And the yeast went throughout my whole system. I was almost like a MRSA case where they had to call in poison control, and they were telling my family to get ready that I was going to transfer over. So everybody was just waiting. And I did, in that near-death experience, what happened was, it was different, a lot different. It was, and this isn't in my book. I had forgot to put it in there, but it was like this dark void. But it was the most peaceful place I have ever felt in my entire life. I believe now that I've done research on it, I was in the nothingness. And I really feel like when I look at it in the hindsight, it was like I had this beautiful near death with my son and God and like the cosmos. But this nothingness really felt like I was in the womb of Mother Earth. And I really feel like it was these two different transitions that I got to energetically feel so I could bring them back to bring people home on some level, to do energy transmissions. I mean, we don't go through this kind of tragedy. It's a lot bigger scale than what we think it is.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe that's what's going on some level when I start doing the research with those near-death experiences.
Mm-hmm. I do too. Yeah, it's just amazing, and wow, it's just very sad. And at the same time, I know there's healing involved, and there's like conscious design there, But it's
Yes.
so sorry that you went through that, Laurie. But I'm glad that you're here, and I'm really happy that you're doing the work you're doing, because a lot of people are going through similar situations, whether they're losing loved ones or whatever. So I just want to thank you, like I said before, and I'm really glad you're here.
Thank you, sweetheart. I'm glad to
Yeah.
be here.
And you sound good, and you sound like, now, what kind of brain injury did you have?
It's a frontal lobe brain injury. It was pretty severe. They had to put a craniotomy in the back of my head to release the pressure.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when we were hit head on, we were both going about 65, 75 miles an hour.
Mm.
So that was pretty horrendous. And, my little brother, he told me to come see him in Alaska a few years afterwards because he said that when he saw me, my head was like as huge as a tire. He said I was so swollen and just black and blue that he said I need to see my sister in a better, back to herself. So I went to Alaska to go see him after the wreck for a couple of years after that, so he could see I was back to normal. But he said it was very haunted. It haunted him for him to see me like that, and he couldn't get that picture of me out of his face until he saw me to where I had healed.
Mm-hmm.
But the brain injury has been pretty horrendous. I think that's, between this and the chemically injured has been probably the biggest trials I've had with the healing.
Mm-hmm.
Coming, with trying to get my body back into order. With the brain injury, what happens is I don't process everything. So I will lose it. So like if someone's giving me directions or telling me their name, maybe I got their first name, but I lose their second and third name. So when I'm trying to learn things or when I'm trying to do things or just in an airport, if I'm overstimulated, I just go blank. It's like I just shut down. I can't take any, I'm too sensitive. It's like too much for me and my brain will just shut down.
Mm-hmm. Right. Sounds like a lot of trauma.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So I'm sure, that's that has a lot to do with it.
Right.
And but on the other realm too is I think that I'm so far into the other brain
Right.
that I think that's why I can see so clearly and feel so clearly. I think that's what the brain injury did. And some of the other people I've done research on and have seen that they think that some of the people with the brain injury have really come down to help us get out of our logic mind and more into the other mind.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard that too. So, and really I do that because not much of my logic mind is that great. I mean, I do what I have to do, but I do struggle with the logic.
Right. And it sounds like the higher consciousness realms integrated in more with your near-death experiences and everything that you were merged with on the other
Right.
side. It certainly sounds like.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that. And then I think too, and then the other thing I think is the biggest straw out of all this is, the emotional intelligence and understanding and how to manage our energy with our emotional intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was very sensitive as a child too, and I was crying all the time as a child. I was very sensitive. I internalized everything. So, learning the emotional intelligence is so key in this planet right now so that we don't have to internalize or take it on that isn't ours.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're not doing anything but enabling instead of helping.
Very true. So true. And what happened to the drunk driver?
He was killed,
Mm-hmm.
and his girlfriend was killed, and his little boy, 8 years old, was killed, and his little girl, 6-year-olds, were killed.
Mm-hmm.
And the little boy, he was in ICU with me for 10 days before he died. And then, Preston was also 8 years old, so they were the same age.
Wow.
And the irony about it is his brother, I'm from Utah, so when I was trying to protect Preston, so we moved to Wyoming, I was thinking if I could get him into a smaller, safer environment, I could control his death. And then it happened 6 weeks later, and little did I know in Wyoming, but you could literally drive up to a drive-up window and order a screwdriver, or I would never have took Preston there.
Mm-hmm.
And I did do a lot of lobbying and got that law changed after, they put a lot of years into it, but my story was the tipping point to change it.
Mm-hmm.
So, his brother actually drove drunk, or his brother was in Utah and was killed in Utah when he was driving drunk. So, it's just the irony of it. Here his poor family. I mean, his brother died of a drunk driver, and then he dies then he dies himself, and his kids are killed along with his girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
So, and he was a repeat offender, uninsured motorist.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, it's people don't see all the bigger picture.
Mm-hmm.
With I mean, I've put a lot of money into my medical that people have no clue, but we didn't get any insurance. We didn't get a dime from Preston being killed. We got a little bit of uninsured motorist, and crime victims helped us pay off some of the hospital bills. And then Worland, Wyoming, where we moved, they did a fundraiser for us so that we didn't have to file bankruptcy and stuff while we were in the hospital. So, that's where community really came together and shined on us and really helped us in that positioning. It was really nice to see that kind of love and unity when these people didn't even know us.
Right. Yeah, and the fact that he was a repeat offender really just ticks me off. I mean, obviously, I know you've forgiven all this, but it's, for somebody who hears this, it's just like so tragic. And then these people seem so irresponsible that were the parties involved that caused it, even though I know that you have forgiveness in your heart and spirit. But still, I mean, repeat offender? Oh, I get annoyed when I hear this stuff.
Well, I mean, I talk at a lot of DUI panels now, and I share the story. And there's some repeat offenders, and to me, it's not just I mean, the drunk driver is absolutely has the choice not to drink and drive, but our country is pretty lenient on drunk driving.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of countries that don't even allow it. They wouldn't put up with it. But because of the greed, if we want to, get the bigger picture here, it's the greed and the alcohol is what it's about. There's a law that most people don't know in the federal government, and it's with alcohol, beer, and sugar. And it's a common law. And so that means that basically the judges just keep, they keep saying it over and over again until it just comes an assumption. So it's not written, it's an assumption.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever anyone's trying to take, the liquor liability or whatever to court, the assumption is that they should have known before they consumed the substance.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how they get off the liability, is that we should have known before we consumed the substance, the effect of the drug
Mm-hmm.
or sugar. So it's our fault that we didn't know, but we should have known. So it's kind of an insanity kind of thing, but it, goes along a lot with what's going on with this planet anyway. So
Right.
I'm not surprised. So when I look at everything, everything's a spectrum of it. I mean, everything is. It's the alcohol industry. It's my family. I mean, my sister just sent me, I just got this a couple of weeks ago. You'll find this interesting. And my grandfather, the pedophile grandfather that I talk about in my book, she did some ancestral research and come to find out he drove drunk here in Idaho where I live now back in, I think, the 1950s and injured a family.
Wow.
So, and this is, here it is, my grandfather, so it's again, it's about programmed and conditioning and what we are allowing.
Right.
Because when you're in another country, I went to the Middle East back in 2010, and the family I was staying with, they said, we wouldn't even drink here in Jordan. And the thing is why? Is because the civilians would not put up with it.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have to make a law in Jordan because the civilians would not put up with somebody being so, asleep that they would drive drunk and hurt somebody. And so, it's just, that's their mindset though. You don't do this, you're going to get hurt by the civilians.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So, it just depends on the conditioning of where you live.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. And that's interesting when you talk about the grandfather, that pattern with alcoholism. Now, in the accidents, it's almost like some kind of a bleed-through effect from generation to generation. And I think you broke that cycle. Unfortunately, it cost you your family, or at least your son.
Right. It did. I mean, it was a high cost to pay, but in the long run, I know it's something that needs to be done. And in the bigger picture, I never lost Preston.
Right. Very true. Yeah, very much so. And that's always very important because a lot of people think, when you die in the illusion of death, that's it, it's all done. And that's really not the truth of it. It's a transfer in consciousness and another step to another dimensional space in consciousness. And obviously you know this by your near-death experiences.
Right, absolutely. And I just know, I've got so many, suggestions in the book or experiences in the book, what happened with Preston, and, they still continue to do. I mean, it just ceases to amaze me, the surprises that he comes, that woman at the store the other day,
Mm-hmm.
we both knew, we didn't even have to say anything. We just both knew. Right. But she was at the point to where, I'm used to it, but she just fell apart at the grocery store. She just fell apart because she was not used to having that felt so deeply.
Mm-hmm.
So I was able to share that with her.
I'm really glad you did too. It's just really, it boils down to respecting life in all forms and designs. And we touched on this off the air, but people take life for granted sometimes. I mean, they take their families for granted. Not everybody, obviously, but there's so much going on in the busyness of life and the illusion of it. Really, when you lose people, it's tragic. And some things can be prevented. But at the same time, you see things like this falling into play where there's a pattern associated.
Right. Absolutely. And the thing is, too, I mean, I could have broke the pattern, my way, too. I mean, I was drinking, too. I mean, when this all happened, I was drinking pretty heavily. I didn't, when I had Preston, I mean, of course, he took so hard for me to get. I promised myself I would never drive drunk with him. Mm-hmm. And, I didn't really drive drunk to begin with because my dad, he scared the bonkers out of me that I didn't want to do that. Mm-hmm. So, when Biff and I I was so stressed out about the premonitions, and my husband has multiple sclerosis, and so I was really stressed out after the move, and I was pretty drunk, and Biff, kind of pushed me to kind of wake me up, and we've never argued like that in front of Preston. We never, ever. So, I was definitely hijacked. It wasn't me. I was definitely hijacked. I allowed it.
Right.
And so I just kind of got up like I'm this victim and looked at Biff like, how could you push me down like that? And got in my car and told Preston to come with me. And I drove less than a mile, and Preston says, "Mommy, where are we going?" And it's just like I came out of my trance. Mm-hmm. And I went, "Oh my God, I'm driving drunk with you."
Wow.
And I just drove back home and, tucked him into bed. And, there's my participation in it. I did it. I mean, I was so hijacked, I did it. So, how can I not possibly forgive the drunk driver? He was hijacked too. And I think that's where my sense of compassion comes from.
Mm-hmm.
Does he have a choice? Absolutely. Did I have a choice? Absolutely. But in that moment, I was hijacked, and I wasn't me. It was like something driving me.
Right. Yeah. Well,
Until Preston said, Mommy, what happened? And that part of me woke up. What am I doing?
Right.
And that's where people don't understand is how those entities, man, especially when you're drinking or doing drugs or, they just latch on and they drive you.
Right. Yeah. It puts holes in the aura. Hard drugs, alcohol. I mean,
Yes.
eventually it weakens the electromagnetic field in the aura, four-body system, and it allows for what we call the lower astral entities to come in. Yeah. Well, they call it spirits for a reason. Alcohol.
Right. Absolutely.
And literally, yeah, people can get taken over. There's no doubt about that. It puts them in a space of vulnerability, just like any other type of, anything really, if they have addiction issues.
Right.
So, yeah.
And I mean, and I was definitely in that space. I mean, I didn't know how to cope with hearing, your son's going to die. And I was showing evidence over and over and over again. And I go that through the book so that the reader understand what I went through. That, what we need to know is we don't need to go through this. Right. I went through this so that we can shift it. We don't need to go through it. And that's what hitting fear head on is shifting this paradigm.
And I'm really grateful you wrote this book. And of course, now they can get this book on Amazon, or what's the best way to get your book?
Yeah, they can get it on Amazon.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, and I recommend everybody pick up a copy. I mean, it really just it's a hard look at something, but at the same time, it's very healing as well. So definitely.
Well, when I came out of the coma, and Preston came to me, and and I saw this dot, and I'm trying to figure out what's going on. I'm trying to recollect myself, and I'm seeing this dot like flying above me, and I'm like, "What in the hell is that?" And he's like, "Hi, Mommy, it's me." And I'm like, "Preston?" And he's like, "Yeah." And I didn't know he died or anything. I'm like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Mommy, I'm with Grandma and Grandpa." And I go, "You are?" And he goes, "Yeah." And he goes, "I love my new home." And I go, "You do?" And he goes, "Yeah." And he goes, "But I'm going to teach you to be light, love, and free."
Nice.
And I'm like, "Oh, okay." He goes, "Don't worry, I'll teach you." I'm like, "All right." So the subtitle of Hitting Fear Head On is, light, love, and free is the key. So that people know that that there are keys out there to come out of this, that we don't need to stay in it, because when we stay in the tragedy, when we stay in the victim, when we stay in those lower vibrational feelings and emotions, is we're not helping matters, we're making them worse. When we raise it and come and take accountability where we participate is when the energy shifts and we can neutralize the energy. And how I forgave the drunk driver is I had to forgive myself first, because I looked at myself going, well, I drove drunk. But the gift of me driving drunk is I could forgive the drunk driver at that time. So, to me, everything happens for a reason, to take us deeper into compassion and understanding, because that's where the healing takes place.
Yeah, it sounds like you have a nice angel on your shoulder too.
Yes.
Yes, you do. And how do you assist others these days? Now, I know you're a spiritual counselor. You're a minister. True?
Yes, I've got my ministry a few years ago, and then, what I do now is I do a lot of people with after-death communication, but I'm not the medium. I teach them to become the medium for themselves. I don't believe in mediums. I facilitate the energy so that they can have a direct connection, a direct connection with their loved ones, because that leaves out the middleman, and that leaves out any manipulation.
Right.
And so that's why I wrote, 18 Steps to Transforming Grief, because that gives you the direct directions, if you will, the stones on how to do that. And so, to me, that's key. Now, that doesn't mean that, I can't validate a person, or I can't help look at it. And if they can't hear their loved ones, I hear that. Then it's usually it's always emotionally related, because the loved one on the other side, when we've got emotionally connected to them or tagging them, they can't go into a higher vibration. So they're all excited when I'm in the picture, or whoever's doing this work is in the picture, because they know that that when I can facilitate the energy, what happens is that energy cord will dissolve, and then they get to go higher into the realms.
Mm-hmm. That makes
So
sense.
that's key here in after-death communication, and that's really what my passion is with the after-death communication. And then the other what I do with energy is I see energy. So I'm very good at seeing energy patterns and looking at inner child aspects and understanding why this pattern's happened. And then we go into the body and we see where it's stuck in the body. And just by me facilitating and asking questions, what happens is that energy block is removed and they get an opening. And we're always looking for an opening, because when there's an opening, that's the corridor to allow source energy in.
Mm-hmm.
So that's basically the premises of what I do.
It's awesome. Yeah, I totally resonate with that information completely. Yep. I'm glad you're doing this work. It's well needed here on this timeline, especially.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that it's so important for all of us to go deep within and see where, to go deep within and find those places and those pockets of where we can go deeper into compassion and deeper into forgiveness, because those pockets are where the heart expands, and that's what presence shows me. I mean, now what I do, and I can probably share this with, your listeners, but what I'll do now, Preston takes me in some pretty dark places, because he knows the heart intelligence and how it operates. And so what he'll do now is he'll say, Mommy, we want you to go meditate, because we're going to use your heart intelligence, an instrument of divine grace, to shine your light on let's say children that are being molested or satanic ritual or whatever it is. And he'll just say, you don't need to see the pictures. You just need to focus on the children and love them. And then I've heard the children say, I could hear them, and this is going to choke me up, but I can hear them in the back say, she sees us. We're being seen.
Wow.
And so that gives them some sort of comfort, and knowing that we're trying to help them and get them out of this hellhole that they're locked into right now.
Right. Yeah, you set the intent. You're putting your energy in their direction. Yeah, absolutely. I totally believe that, without a doubt. And it's
I've seen too many miracles, and I've had too much proof too. And when I do this, the after effect, because the after effect is huge, and the key is when we're all doing this is what's going to make this world flip, and we all know we need a flip.
Oh, absolutely. And they're too busy. A lot of mainstream right now is really sucked into the lower vortex. They're not navigating on the higher levels. Everybody's polarizing with the drama.
Right. And so the ones that aren't busy I feel like are the, if we want to call it the way showers or the pioneers or whatever, holding space or whatever, we're the ones that are going to be opening the vortex for them to wake up.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to be holding the space for them.
Absolutely. Yeah, and you're already doing that. Yep, absolutely. I'm so glad to have you on tonight, and I know we only have like 10 minutes left, plus or minus, but I do want to have you back. So make sure you come back, okay?
I will, definitely. And thank you again. And also, James Bartley, too. I just want to plug him. He is such an inspiration and such a beautiful spirit. And I'm so glad that he brought us together, because I'm glad I got to know you now, because you have a piece that I don't have. And so I think that's what it's about. All of us pieces coming together and sharing our pieces, because when we do, we're all going to become whole.
Absolutely. Yeah, and there's cellular trauma associated with a lot of that. And I know you're dealing with cellular trauma. So, and once again, putting focus on that area, it moves the energy, doesn't it?
Correct. Absolutely. It does move the energy. And that, when I do readings on a lot of people, that's basically what it is, healing the energy. And I didn't even know I was capable to do this. I mean, it was a funny story how I found out what happened. Was we were moving, this is about 5 years ago, and a man, it was a long story, but it took him like 4 or 5 times. He was going to fix my air conditioner, and he really didn't want to come out, and it was out of the ordinary. So when I opened up the door, and we talked like 5 times on the telephone, and he had resistance to come out. So when I opened the door and I said, why are you here? It's not because of my air conditioner. It was about something else. And he just looked at me and he said, lady, I'm going crazy. I've got parasites all over me. And he goes, they're in my mouth. They're all over me. And so I just kind of did a scan. And I'm so used to scanning because I scan my body all the time with doing Vipassana. And I didn't know. And I just kind of scanned his energy field with my energy field. And I just went up and down. And he goes, what and then he says, what are you doing? And I says, I don't know. I'm just being shown to do this. I don't know why. Well, then he had to come back the next day with a part, and he said he was going to be there at 10, and he came back at 8 o'clock in the morning, woke me up, and said, oh my God, I don't know what you did, but I feel like so much better. Whatever you did, the parasites are gone. So I realized at that point in time, there was something going on in my system that I didn't know I had until he showed it to me. Mm-hmm. But this isn't something that I, say, I dissolve parasites. I really don't want.
Well, apparently it works through frequency. Yet. But were they astral parasites? What kind of parasites are we talking about?
I think they were more astral parasites.
That's what it sounds like, yeah.
I think there was some reptilian hooks in there.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's all sorts of things that are floating around people don't even realize, energetically speaking. And then I have a feeling that it's also, we were talking about, and I know we're going to run out of time in the illusion of, but we were talking about our ancestors, and I really think that there's a bleed-through effect happening where people are actually carrying the burden of their ancestry. So I'm almost thinking they need to release vows and contracts associated with that.
I agree. I agree with you. I do. I agree. Mm-hmm. I think that we need to release any kind of contract. I mean, we shouldn't be in any kind of contract as far as I'm concerned, because all the contracts are hierarchy anyways, and we don't want to be in any hierarchy. We want to be in equality and mutuality.
Right, absolutely. And also, Laurie, what's your website again for everybody? If they want to contact you for any insight, readings, counseling?
They can go to my website, and they can just send an email on contact information.
Excellent.
And it's Laurie, Laurie, Boggs, BOGGS.com.
Excellent. And also your wonderful book, Hitting Fear Head On, Light, Love, and Free is the Key. Please pick a copy up, everybody. It's an awesome book. And also, we're probably going to run out of time in illusion, but I did want to ask you now, it sounds like obviously the work you're doing on this timeline is extremely powerful. What do you want to leave the audience with tonight insofar as anything that they should focus on?
I think what we're focusing on right now is really coming into ourselves, into our own, and concentrating on that more, and the yearning. I hear a lot of people are in yearning. If we can use that yearning and to take it in to connect with our own soul, like, just love yourself and just say, I love you, because that's really who you're calling back. Mm-hmm. It's not the external world. It's yourself. Mm-hmm. It's your true self that you're calling back. So when we can use that longing and that yearning to call ourselves back is when we're going to get more anchored in, and we're also going to, we're going to be at that vibration of loving ourselves, so that we will be out of the feeding frenzy energy too. I
think you're so right about the love, and sometimes people use it, they just don't seem to really put emphasis on it, but I know you do, and it's almost hard for me to digest sometimes when you first said that to me. With your consciousness, your energy, and it's because I've been in such a shielded environment energetically. So yeah, so thank you for the beautiful energy you radiate. It's and the information you're presenting and the work that you're doing once again. Now, what is down the road for you in the next few months? I know you said you're doing a workshop or something. Are you going to one?
Yeah, I am. I'm going to go to what is called holographic kinetics. It's pretty deep. It's going to be about a 7-day workshop, about 8 hours a day. So it's going to be pretty intense. I'm excited for it, though, because I know it's information that is going to go deeper into the denser, non-beneficial energy, so that I can have more tools to look at and go deeper within the unconscious mind, because we all know that's where the entities are at. Mm-hmm. That's what drives us. That's what drives people. So we want to go into that unconscious mind and look at those unconscious mind, be it past lives or hooks or ancestrals or whatever hook that is, to clear it out.
Excellent.
So to me, I really want to work on the unconscious mind to clear out the non-beneficial energy, so that we can bring more divine grace and Mother Earth energy in.
That's wonderful. Laurie, thank you so much. I so appreciate it. And everybody, please stay tuned. We'll be right back with James Bartley.